Team is Killing Us, a podcast about what the Carolina Panthers do to good people. She is Lauren Brownlow. I am Demetri and Lauren, what is killing me today is actually something you said last week as we were getting ready for the Combine. And that is, now that the Combine is over, this is when the smoke screens and absolute bullshit coming out of NFL front offices really ramps up into overdrive. Between now and the draft, you are going to hear so many obvious lies framed as truths that it will make your head spin.
Yeah, Shedeur Sanders going number one. Actually, he's not going in the first round at all. Like, right. Whatever. I haven't heard number one, to be fair, but I've heard top five. I've heard he's going to be in the green room, which I'm sure ESPN is like drooling for, by the way. Like, imagine Shedeur, like the despondent Sanders family trying to put on the face as he slips down the. I'm sure ESPN's like, ooh, that would be a good time for everyone. But like, yeah, I don't. You never really know. And always the most intrigue is about quarterbacks, though. And I feel like without a quarterback like that you're sure is going to be a top 5 pick, you maybe see less of that. But there's still that stuff because the GMs know that they all read the reports and whatever. Like, they read each other's stuff and they have to decide what to take seriously and what not to.
Yeah, I mean, look, we'll turn this back to the Panthers here in just a second. I think it is pretty obvious someone is going to take Cam Ward with a top 5 pick. I think the real lack of that overall intrigue is like last year you felt like Caleb Williams was obviously the dude. Obviously he has the capability to change a franchise. I felt that way about both CJ Stroud and Bryce in the draft before. I think Cam Ward will be fine. I kind of think about Cam Ward the way I think about Bryce now. I think it will be fine. I think he will be a capable starter. I don't think the list of guys that will be better than him is short. Like, if I were Tennessee, I would commit to sucking one more year. Like, go get Travis Hunter and commit to sucking one more year.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because I've heard, I mean, I think you can make a compelling argument both ways. Like, the thing is, you could do worse as a starter. Do you know what I mean? Than Cam Ward. Like, I think he has like a lower floor than a lot of guys you could get. And I think his age plays to his advantage in that way. Like, that he's been around a while. Like, you kind of know exactly who he is. Yeah. And you're not going to get a lot of surprises. I mean, I can't believe they drafted Will Levis at all. That was one. So, like, the fact that they drafted him, and no one thought he was, at least no one that I know.
Nobody you respect really bought into he's a first round quarterback. Yeah, no, I'm
like with a franchise quarterback. Like, Cam Ward's way better than him. So, I mean, maybe there is the temptation there to just go, okay, well, you know what? This might be a better bet for the future. But I guess, like, you can't keep drafting the quarterback year after year. So I get that too. At the same time, your fans, we've seen it. We know it. We've lived it. Your fans aren't going to be that invested if they don't think the quarterback of the future is on your roster or you're about to draft that person.
There's a dude that I think would be a great fit for the Panthers much later in the draft, who's a safety out of Iowa named Sebastian Castro, who he's what you're talking about with Cam Ward, where the floor is pretty high. So even if there are a lot of dudes that are better than him, he'll always be a capable starter. But I look at a guy like Sebastian Castro. If the Panthers said, yeah, we think really highly of that guy, like, great, that's a 3rd round pick. That's what you want in a 3rd or 4th round pick. I wouldn't feel great about taking that kind of guy, like where that's the payoff at number 1. But let me ask you about something different. Dane Brugler from The Athletic put out a mock draft that had a very interesting pick for the Panthers, and it brings up something worth talking about. He projected Shamar Stewart, who's an edge rusher from Texas A&M, to the Panthers at number 8. Stewart's like the expectation for Stewart is all over the board. 2nd round guy, top 10 guy. I've seen it all, right? But here's the question. Stewart put up great measurable numbers at the Combine. He does not have great production numbers on the field during his time at Texas A&M. So I wonder how you look at drafting a dude that seems to have all the tools, but the numbers aren't there.
So my biggest thing with that, well, first of all, why was my first thought, how much was Jimbo's fault? Probably not. Okay, so I do know this about defensive guys. Offensive guys, those stats concern me more, for sure, than defensive guys, personally. Because with defensive guys, at least at certain positions, I know that you can have an impact on the field with your play and with what you're capable of without necessarily racking up a lot of stats. I know that varies some by position. Obviously, I think most people, even casual fans, understand that about, like, for example, a defensive tackle. But a defensive tackle, because we don't know how often, like, how much attention the O-line has to devote to a certain guy, how hard if he ties guys up, it frees other guys up to make plays. Like, I think a lot of us understand that part, but like a defensive,
I think Luke Kuechly has talked about this. I think Luke Kuechly has talked about this before, that a lot of his stops in the backfield are the result of an offensive line devoting two guys to star up front, so that there is a little bit of a hole for him to work with that may not have been there otherwise.
Right. And so, like, I think that stuff definitely makes a difference. And like, what I want to know, what I would want to know if I'm a GM is, I want to talk to, who I want to talk to? Opposing coaches. Yeah. And I want to know, like, what did you think of this guy? Did he scare you? If not, why? Like, be honest. Like, I would want to know. I don't know if they would, like, I don't know how much they would be honest about that kind of thing, but that's the kind of stuff I would want to know as a GM, is like, from opposing coaches about this guy. That's a source you don't hear as much about people talking to, but that's what I would want to know. Like, who are you scheming around? I don't really give a shit about the stats. Tell me who is giving you nightmares. Like,
it's a good point. It's why you develop a coaching tree, and B, it's why you develop contacts, so that you will have those guys that will be honest with you. Just real quick, just to give you an idea of what Stewart did, he was described as flying in his 40-yard dash, and he's coming into the combine 20 pounds heavier than guys like Von Miller, like Jadeveon Clowney, who also had really impressive speed stats at the combine. But his college career, over the course of 3 years where he played, if he was not a starter, he was at least a significant part of the defensive back rotation. Over 3 years, 4.5 sacks, and he totaled just 31 tackles last year. And like you said, if you're a defensive tackle, 31 total tackles is understandable, because part of that job is moving people out of the way to make plays for your other guys.
And a low sack number as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Off the edge, I get a little concerned, but I did think about another SEC defensive lineman, and that's James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, who is a little small, a little inconsistent, but when he makes the plays, like, damn, he's got it, right? And if he ended up a Panther, I'd be really happy with that, even if the stats don't show the consistency necessarily. So it calms me a bit. I have thought Shamar Stewart would be a good pick for the Panthers in the second round. This is less about Shamar Stewart and more about the idea of just knowing it's there and convincing yourself, because the Panthers are not the only team that have done this. And in fact, this doesn't just happen in the NFL. It probably happens more in the NBA, of coaching staffs and front offices convincing themselves, oh, well, he hasn't had our coaching yet. He hasn't had NFL coaching yet. We could be the one to fix this. Right. Exactly. So I get a little more, I have a little more pause, exactly like you said. When this happens with an offensive guy, particularly anything other than wide receiver. Wide receiver, I can see opposing defenses scheming out of a game. And so
if your quarterback sucks, like,
Sure. But if you're a quarterback, if you're a running back, like, that's when I would get concerned you don't have the production stats.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, with all the combine talk, like, and maybe this is showing my age, whatever, it is what it is. But I'm getting big, like, Al Davis energy from that. Like, and that's not a positive. Not in the positive Al Davis way, in the negative Al Davis way, in the I'm going to draft Darius Hayward-Bay way.
Over my
I don't like it. Also, like, are they only looking at SEC defensive players or something?
It really does sort of give off the vibe of, like, do you remember, and it wasn't that long ago, that the Bengals would only look at Big Ten guys, or like Cincinnati or Kentucky or West Virginia, because they were so cheap. They weren't going that. They weren't sending their scouts any further than what was driving distance to go see great players. It does give that vibe. But you bring up Al Davis, and it's interesting. We all think of Al as a kook when it comes to what he values in the first round. However, there is a kid, and I forget his name, and I don't even think he's like considered a legitimate draft prospect this year. He was a linebacker at Old Dominion that has led the country in tackles each of the last 2 years. And it's like regularly accepted that a lot of that is about fudging the books. So in that respect, I do get valuing intangibles over racking up stats.
There's definitely like stat chicanery that happens like regularly. And like there are certain positions where like when you lead the country in tackles, it's not usually like a positive for your team. If you look at the team.
Well, like, I was about to say, I mean, remember the kid came out of Old Dominion. Yeah. He had plenty of opportunities for tackles.
Like Duke football before it was what we know it as today.
Right.
Which I'm glad I can say that sentence now. But like when it was the worst every single year, a lot of times like a Duke linebacker who was a good player, don't get me wrong, but like it was often a good player, but still like a Duke linebacker or like somebody like that would be like leading the league in tackles. And you're like, oh, okay. And also like, to the other concerning thing to me about the A&M guy is like, I saw your offense, sir. So I know how often your ass was on the field. Like, so what happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? Like, look, someone who knows more about football than me, which is plenty of people, like, feel free to let me know. Like, okay, maybe XYZ happened or whatever. It's Jimbo's. I can accept Jimbo being a reason. Listen, my brain is simple and I know well enough to know that Jimbo can be the problem more often than not in his last few stops. But like at the same time,
Elko, right? Not because Elko's a bad coach, but because he prefers an offense that works very slowly and stays on the field for a while. I could see that.
Well, that's true. They probably weren't on the field as much the last what is he's been there 2 years now or
no? This is his first season.
Yeah, this is his first year. So like that probably was more of a thing this year. And so for this year specifically, I can excuse some of it. Like I'm sure they weren't on the field as much, but I saw those quarterbacks before Elko got there, and they weren't spending much time off the field. That defense, they were doing a lot of 3 and outs on offense. So I don't know.
Another reporter from The Athletic, our friend Joe Person, had a report, Lauren, about conversations he was having at the Combine where he said that he has walked away with the very distinct impression that the Panthers are going to be, quote, aggressive in free agency. And I read the headline before diving into the article. My first thought was, do the Panthers have money we don't know about? Right? Because when the cap went up, and you combine the fact that, they've already announced that Shaq's not coming back. So when you add in all the money that they have available, at least it seems they have available right now, you're at about $30 million, which is better than what we thought, but also not enough to be super aggressive, I wouldn't think.
I mean, unless you literally are only going after like one player in specifically, or you're trying to to be fair, or you could be like me, where if I love to hit up a bargain store. Okay.
So that's kind of what this read like when you read the report. Like it sounds very much like, at least according to Person's reporting, it sounds very much like the Panthers walked into the Combine thinking Jalen Walker could be the guy and walked out very happy with what they saw out of Jalen Walker. That's the Georgia linebacker that we talked about last week with some versatility to play in the middle or on the edge. Okay, fine. The idea behind being aggressive in free agency is to constantly be able to take the best player on the board and not really have to think about need. In the case of Walker, fills the need. If you feel like he's the best player on the board, awesome. But I wonder if the things sort of not being said, you read between the lines, and we'll get into some of the people that Joe Person said that he thinks the Panthers will be active on in a minute. It leads me to believe if the Panthers would like to be able to, if they feel like there's a wide receiver there that is a difference maker, take that wide receiver and not feel like they're doing the defense a disservice by not using that pick there.
Well, that makes me a little nauseous. I said this to you, And I have not used, well, no, not in the first round. Never mind. I was going to say I would not want them to take a running back. Delete. Never mind. I was going to say though, so no, I don't want that. But it's like, again, I get it. But at the same time, it's like, really, I thought this was a deep draft of defensive players. I'm so confused. Why the actual F?
So
would you do that?
So this is my thought, because it is a deep draft, particularly when it comes to pass rushers. My thought was, if you can sign guys for 2 or 3 years that are where those rookies are going to be right now, those rookie pass rushers are going to be right now, have you done yourself a disservice in what is a bad division that is probably going to come down to a few breaks going one way or the other? I still agree with you. I would still rather, if this is a deep pass rush draft, then let's load up on people at the thing that we were weakest at last year. But that being said,
the flip of that is you can't just draft one pass rusher or sign one pass rusher and be like, oh, we're good. That D line, even at full health, was an issue.
Right. And it seems like, based on when you read about mocks, when you read about what free agents that Joe Person is saying that Panthers personnel are commenting to him about, it seems like everything is on the board, because, Lauren, this list of veteran free agents that intrigue them, it's a lot up the middle and not very much on the edge. And that tells me that they want to at least have options when it comes to DerrickBrown.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I've seen some of that as well, and that's what's made. I've thought the same thing. I'm like, maybe they're worried about him and his injury a little more than we even thought.
Yeah, I mean, so Mason Graham, who is the big defensive tackle out of Michigan, he's one of those guys, one of 3 defensive players that people say is ready to go right now. I've seen talk that he actually has the frame that you would feel comfortable moving to the edge. Okay, cool. That doesn't explain these other defensive tackles that are on the list, right? That's still these other, if the plan is to take Graham and play him alongside of Brown, okay, so what is the plan for these other free agents you say they're interested in, who have spent 6 or 7 years in the league as defensive tackles? That has to say something about what you think about Brown long term.
Yeah, it's definitely, when I've seen that, it's been a little confusing to me, because I'm not saying they're all set there. I understand you always need defensive tackle depth, and this year certainly showed that. But at the same time, I really thought the bigger issue with that line this year was the pass rush. And I do understand it has to work somewhat in tandem. If you don't have that DerrickBrown up in the middle eating that space, it's going to make everybody's lives harder. But at the same time, you heard I'm not saying Clowney didn't play well at times, right?
Sure.
But when your best pass rusher going into a season is Jadeveon Clowney's, relatively speaking, old ass, that's not good. And so for me, that's the number one priority. And so whatever the cheapest and best and most efficient way to address that, and however frequently they can address that, it needs to be addressed. And so it does, it makes me, if they drafted a Graham and not a wide receiver, I would be much happier. I'll be honest.
Oh, sure.
Just personally, because how I feel about the receiving core, especially with Jatavian Sanders back and healthy. I feel mostly I don't feel like they're set, but at the same time, you have a position group that's well closer to being okay in terms of what you want to be than this particular group, which is in shambles still.
I think you have a group of playmakers on offense that I think you use the right word. I think they are okay. I think the defense is very distinctly not okay.
No, it's very not okay. It is in shambles. It is a disaster.
Yeah.
It is very bad. And I'm not trying to throw shade, but that's what it is.
So real quick, let me run down the list of people Joe Person said he is hearing rumblings about connected to Carolina. There's one specific I want to focus on here, but 2 defensive tackles, Milton Williams, who was with the Eagles this year, DJ Jones, who has been in the league for a while. He was first with the 49ers and then with Denver, where his defensive coordinator was Ejiro Evero. So that one kind of makes some sense, and they probably look at him as a little bit more depth than maybe they do Milton Williams. A name on the list that Lauren really makes me uncomfortable is ZachBaun, linebacker with the Eagles, had a coming out party of a season this year, had an absolute banger of a season this year.
Mm-hmm.
Panthers kind of have a history of betting big on dudes where the banger of the season is the outlier and getting burned by it. Case in point, Miles Sanders. I don't love the idea of making the priority free agent somebody whose history would suggest we just saw the exception rather than the rule.
Well, and again, this isn't me saying the linebackers are fixed either.
Yeah.
Far from it, especially like without Shaq, that hurts. But there were also that was addressed in the draft last year, I think relatively effectively. Like it's still not, I'm not saying it's fixed. I'm not saying they don't need like a better player there. But again, my 911 positions for this team are DB and pass rush. Whatever, if you want to call that a linebacker, that's a specialty pass rusher or whatever, fine. I don't really care as long as that's what you're specifically addressing. Because there was none.
But to your point, ZachBaun plays in the middle. You know Josie Jewell is going to be a starter. Maybe you feel like Trevin Wallace is ready to assume that role.
I thought he was pretty good. Yeah.
I thought so too. I think ideally, like if you're a competitor, Josie Jewell is your second best linebacker in a 3-4.
That's fair.
And I don't think Wallace is there yet.
But at the same time, like you're going to have to pay so much for him.
Agreed.
Like what is the point? Like I don't understand that.
I mean, you are talking about a guy that is probably going to be in the range of probably like 4 years, 70 million, with more than 50% of that guaranteed. Like that's a big commitment. That's a big commitment for a dude that like I don't know that he can do in 25 what he did in 24. I just don't have a reason to believe that.
Like, I hope that's not what they think being aggressive in free agency is, because to me, I look at that and I go, what was the point? Like, to me, that's like me going to the thrift store and not buying like the 8 or 9 cool things I found and instead going to buy like one really expensive thing and then being like, wow, my needs are somehow not met. This is weird.
I think if you are going to be aggressive on one dude in free agency, and I'm not saying like specifically this is the dude, but this is the position, like make it Javon Holland, make it a proven safety, like because here's the other thing about ZachBaun being the top priority free agent, Lauren. If indeed Jalen Walker is the top priority draft prospect, what position does Jalen Walker play? Middle linebacker. Like again,
well, they probably wouldn't draft. I'm assuming that would be like if they didn't draft him.
Or if they drafted him with the plan to make him an edge, right?
I as shit hope so. Anyways, you never know. But I mean, if that's your free agency plan, is that all the cap room? Would that be like almost all the cap room?
I mean, it would be pretty close to it. I guess you've got to assume nobody is off the table because you can have a roster way over the cap until some date in June. So maybe, you just say we'll deal with it down the road. But you know who did that for years and years and years is the Saints. And now like this is the year that they are paying the piper for that. They may not be able to field a 53-man roster.
And it's not good business, like you said. No. Like I have respected that it has seemed like Dan Morgan knows how to shop at a thrift store. You know? I mean, because it's an art. It's an art form. It's not easy.
For sure. And look, guys that I have said I think are prime candidates to be cut, Clowney and Wanham, are dudes that he did a good job with finding at the thrift store. It just because they are candidates to be cut does not mean they were not successful signings.
100%. And that's like personally. So when I hear them say they'll be aggressive, I'm like, ooh, I hope it's like being aggressive in terms of like me finding my great like Mike Tolbert jersey at a thrift store like $30 as opposed to paying $100 for a Panthers full price jersey right now, or at least probably more than that. Now, but like to me, that's what aggression should mean for this team, because they have so many needs on defense, like so many. Again, this is probably the worst defense in franchise history.
Statistically, the worst defense in NFL history in terms of points allowed.
So like for me, it's like in any time, like I get why you bring it up and that you're doing it based on like what you're hearing and stuff. But when I hear wide receiver, I go, what the fuck? Please no. Like,
Yeah.
sorry, it just makes me panicky because I'm like, you have the worst defense ever.
But see, so wide receiver, this is actually a really good, like, to your point, Lauren.
Yeah. You can't thrift shop there as easily.
That's like, I've been saying, like, I think that's where you sign the impact free agent, but it does seem like all the impact free agents are outside of the Panthers price range. And so when I hear aggressive in free agency and these are the names, it's like a magician, right? Watch this hand because this hand is doing the actual action. Like, this hand is moving and everything we're doing here doesn't really matter so much, like, because we can't afford to play in that particular space. I did just drop my first official mock draft of the season for OG fan subscribers. Sign up at ogtrianglemedia.com. Lauren, I say this every time.
All 7 rounds. I'm JK.
Oh, Lauren, all 7 rounds with trades and all. I know you make fun, but I live for this shit, Lauren.
No, the trade, I know you do. I'm so glad you do because then I don't have to. So I appreciate it. I'm not knocking it because I don't have to. Like, because honestly, like, I don't have the head, especially this time of year. Like I told you, I get so resentful because I'm like, I'm trying to follow college basketball right now. Football just fucking ended. Like, can you give me a break? Like, stay out of my life.
I was telling Mitch and Mia this when we recorded the women's basketball podcast this week. I have come around to really liking the women's game because it looks like the NBA I grew up with. Like,
the quarters are the best.
Not only that, like, so South Carolina is a really good example. Like, if you drive the lane against the Gamecocks, there are fucking consequences for driving the lane, right?
Yep.
So I say that to say, you, Lauren, know outside of Alabama, and because I love you so much, the Carolina Panthers, the team that, like, truly has my heart is the Boston Celtics, right? That has been my team since I was a wee lad. I cannot watch a Celtics game that is not the playoffs because it does not look like the basketball I know and love. Like, I need some offensive rebounding effort in there, right? So it's I'm bringing this up as like the difference between you and me. It's very easy for me to turn my brain off and go seeking combination college and NFL content right now.
I gotta tell you, I don't, not to get us too far off track, but I nothing has made me feel older than the way I feel when I watch basketball now, where I'm like, where's the mid-range game? Where's the floaters?
Agreed.
Where's a nice post up? And I'm like, I am 8,000 years old right now. Like, I am so old. I am an elderly, but it is a lot of threes. And like, I'm not saying threes can't be exciting, but it has become so 3-point centric.
It is. This is so. Mia pointed this out to me as we were talking. I was talking about why I like the women's game. So I've never been a fan of either Steph Curry or Caitlin Clark because when everything is a 3-point shot from the parking lot, none of those shots are interesting when that's what you're doing every single time. As she pointed out, and she's a huge Caitlin Clark apologist, do you realize how unfair that is to those two? Because what they are doing is something we had not seen for decades. I was like, I get it, but it's my brain and they can't have it. Like,
the problem is the problem I think that comes in that they look like ordinary people physically also. Right. And so then that just makes everyone think like, oh, I could be in the NBA and do that. Sir or madam. No.
That was always my way of contextualizing the LeBron versus Steph era when it was the Cavs and Warriors every year.
You couldn't be LeBron.
Yeah, LeBron is a monster from another planet, right? Steph looks like he rolled out of bed in Garter and is now played on a basketball court. Anyway, OG fans. Yeah. OGTriangleMedia.com is where you get
our football podcast.
That's right. That's right. It's where you get our full coverage of not only the Carolina Panthers. That is where Tom Edwards writes about the Carolina Hurricanes. Joe Giglio went in depth on the ACC settlement with Florida State and Clemson this week. $13 a month, all kinds of cool opportunities you get too, including when Ovius and Giglio drop exclusive merchandise. Sign up today, OGTriangleMedia.com. And when you're done with that, do us a favor, rate and review this podcast wherever it is you're hearing it, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, whatever. Leaving a rating and a review helps with every single platform's algorithms. It helps more people discover the show. So if you like what we do here, the best thing you can do for us is leave a rating and a review. Lauren, let's circle back to the aggressive in free agency conversation and also the do the Panthers actually have money conversation. Because in addition to how aggressive you want to be, apparently with the middle of this defense, you also have to figure out how you're going to keep J.C. Horn, which Joe Person reports that like both sides, both Horn's agents and Dan Morgan have said, this is the priority. We are going to get this done. You've got to figure out how you're keeping at least Austin Corbett, if not Austin Corbett and Cade Mays. Like, you're talking about a lot of money dedicated to just keeping your own guys this offseason.
That was the other issue for me when we were talking about aggression, was I was like, okay, well, aren't you trying to re-sign others? So
right.
What
the team told Joe Person that they are comfortable with where J.C. Horn's health is. That's great. But if J.C. Horn's agent hears that, and look, this is what the agent should do. If he hears that, he is putting his guy out there to be paid with other top flight corners in the league. That's going to cost you about $20 million a year at minimum.
To be fair, behind closed doors, they could always say, yeah, we only said that so that like we're not trying to embarrass. Like, we love JC. We don't want to like embarrass him in public. And in case it didn't work out here, we don't want to put him in a bad position, with another team or whatever. Like, I don't know. It's but I mean, because I don't know that I'm 100% comfortable with his health personally, but you know me, like, I get very squeamish very easily on that stuff. And I still want people to get paid and like not have their careers, set on fire because of,
And I think this is why it's important to not just JC, but also the Panthers, that this is out there publicly. Like, I'm also not comfortable with where his health is. Obviously, you and I don't know what the team does. We don't know what it is that JC Horn has heard, but people like you and me are going to be very critical of a $20 million a year deal for a dude like JC Horn. So the team and the guy.
Wait, that was a year? I saw that in the notes and assumed you meant like total somehow.
No.
A year?
Yeah. I mean, that's like, if you talk about what the top flight, like, I think it seems to be from reading not just Joe, but a couple of other reports about guys re-signing with their team. It seems to me JC knows he's not getting top corner money, like the top corner money.
Right. No,
but he would still like to be paid on a certain tier, and that's what the tier is.
Well, that makes my stomach feel bad.
This is defensive back is really interesting. It's not quarterback where we have killed the middle class of that position, right? There's still a middle class, but good luck convincing any of those guys that they're in the middle class, right? Like, you've got to have a certain attitude to play any of the ball skills positions, right? Quarter or receiver.
Yes, 100%. But I mean, yeah, that's a tough one because like, if you lost one of Mays or Corbett, like, it would hurt, but it wouldn't be like catastrophic necessarily. Whereas like, if you lose Horn and and you're not like going hard on the DBs in the draft and in free agency, and that's almost all, like, again, I don't know that they have enough literal space to like sign because you can't just bank on like one DB being able to just like step right in, unless you're drafting a DB. And have we even heard that floated?
I mean, I know that they were very active with Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky in terms of like, they had a private session with him at the combine. They were all surrounding him for
another
his
SEC
workouts.
Guy. Jeez.
I mean,
I thought this was a down year in the SEC defense. Like, what the hell?
I like Hairston a lot. I think Hairston's ceiling, and actually he's one of the guys I took in the mock draft, so I wrote about this. If you're an OG fan subscriber, you'll see me go in depth to this a little more. I think his ceiling is as one of the best second corners in the league. Like, if we're drafting Maxwell Hairston. No, but if you're drafting Maxwell Hairston, I think you have to know you have JC Horn locked up for the long term, right?
Yeah.
So, because that's what makes you a formidable secondary all of a sudden.
Well, at least much better, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, a few weeks ago,
some guys showed some promise there. I'm not saying they didn't, but you need much better stuff around those guys that are probably better as like fill-in guys, like a Mike Jackson or what have you.
I think some of the dudes at the combine that really shine, like Nicky Manwari out of South Carolina, now might be sort of the primary safety prospect in this draft. I think it's weird. You don't want to take that position at number 8, but you're probably not going to be in position to get him at 57. So, why would you don't want to reach, right? So I think that Dan is a smart guy. Dan is paying attention to where the winds are blowing, but also knowing nothing has happened yet. With all of the reports, all of the mock drafts, you can wait and see how the board plays out, but you keep all these things you've seen in mind to sort of make you think about, okay, if we're taking a meeting with Maxwell Hairston, and Hairston is more likely to go before 40 than last all the way to 57, is he worth the effort and the capital it's going to cost to get up
there? Yeah. That's tough.
Lauren, I'm going to give you my strongest take for the Panthers in the draft.
Okay.
Draft both a kicker and a punter.
I will throw. I don't have. If we were in the same room, something would be coming. A projectile would be headed straight for you.
I understand. When the salary cap goes up as much as it has, everybody expects to get paid, and I don't know how you justify $3 million a year to Johnny Hekker when one of the best punters in the draft, whoever
he didn't have a great year.
Well, yeah, I mean, it also he's what 35, 36.
Well, punters can be old.
Yeah, they can be old. But my point is, like, that is an age and that is a level of experience where you expect a certain paycheck, right? It's punter. You could probably get the best one of the draft with your 7th round pick. And what are you doing there otherwise?
To clarify, if they spent one on one of those positions in the 7th round, I'm not freaking out about it personally.
Yeah.
But remember, you can also sign some of these guys as like free agents, and there are a lot of good. I would say more so maybe with punters than kickers probably at the collegiate level, but there are a lot of like good punters. I'm of that belief that you could sign somebody as an undrafted free agent.
So
and then,
listen, that is where kicker specifically, I think you have to draft, because I think Ben Sauls out of Pitt is a really good, like, you look at his accuracy and distance stats. Like, that dude's got it all. I don't think you want to risk having to fight out with other teams for that dude. I'm with you on punter. Like, if you
I don't want a Pitt kicker, no offense.
No, I mean, I think if you have
it's not rational.
No, I hear you. And look, whenever someone says draft kicker, like, everybody's head goes to a Roberto.
Well,
Ryan,
okay.
Right? That's not what I'm advocating for.
Right. Like, for me, I'm just saying, like, if it's before the 7th round, I will probably throw something at someone. Right. No matter, we're depending on where I am. Or at something, like maybe my television. I don't know. But like, if it's like in that area, I'm not going to care as much. But I do at least for punter, I genuinely feel like you could still get a good punter, a pretty good college punter, because most people aren't drafting punters. Like, that's the thing.
Right.
Or kickers. So
I'll
be available.
I'll throw 2 stats at you real quick. In each of the last 3 drafts, 3 or more kickers drafted as early as the 5th round.
Yes, I know kickers are getting drafted more. Yeah.
In the last 3 NFL drafts, we have not seen any more than a total of 3 punters be taken.
Yeah. So you can wait. Like, that's all I'm saying is, like, I would rather wait on the punter. Unless, and Presley Harvin was already in the league. But, like, if you told me you were going to draft Presley Harvin, I would have been like, yes, please. Because it's my favorite punter of all time. Love that guy. But, like, but if it's not him, like, for me, it's like, no. Like, you can draft the kicker, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to have a big issue with it. I still think you bring in free agent guys and, like, just see what's out there in terms of, like, have them compete against each other, see who's doing the best and how much cap space you have. But you can I think you can get somebody at each of those positions out of college that won't be a disaster.
I think that was their plan, clearly, with kicker last year. Remember, they brought in Harrison Mevis from Missouri, and he just didn't beat out either Eddie or the guy they've just re-signed, who was the fallback option. I can't remember.
I forgot his name.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. But obviously that didn't work out last year. I think a good kicker is a difference maker when you're talking about, slim margins like you are in the NFC South. I want to wrap up today because the NFLPA survey, the annual survey, dropped literally an hour after you and I recorded last week.
Yeah, I saw that.
I
didn't read it all, but I saw that. Yeah.
You and I think, agree that 2024 Dave Tepper certainly is not perfect, but is light years better than 2023 Dave Tepper. 2023 Dave Tepper was a special class of terrible owner.
Yes.
Fair?
Yes. Yeah, because he shut up this year.
Right. Dave Tepper is still ranked 31 out of 32 owners in the league by the players. Only Woody Johnson, the owner of the New York Jets, who lets his teenage sons pick players based on Madden ratings, is rated lower.
It's not the only issue with Woody. But,
no, there's a lot of issues with Woody. I would think from a player standpoint, the absolute comical dedication to never being over 500 would have to get on your nerves. I would imagine for everybody else in the building, there are thousands of issues when it comes to not just Woody, but the entire Johnson clan.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, that's not a huge surprise. Like, some of the worst owners are just no longer owners also. So that has helped. Like Dan Snyder being gone is very helpful for everyone.
Yeah.
Except David Tepper, who's now like second to last and is like, well, so some of the worst owners are not there anymore.
Right. But here is what stood out to me as I was looking at the survey, the Panthers grade specifically. Coaches and staff are held in really high regard. Canales got an A-. The training staff got a B+. The health staff got an A- or got an A. It is all things Tepper could fix like that are dragging the team down, right? The travel situation, the weight room, the way ownership interacts with players. Like the Panthers finished number 25 out of 31, and it's a real A or F situation for that team.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it certainly will help. Like the biggest thing they did to help, like who would you have rather played for? Matt Rule or like Dave Canales? Like me as like a non-football person.
Look, don't forget Frank Reich. I'm sure Frank Reich did not do the Panthers grades any favors.
So like if you're a player, I can totally understand but that helps. That can only help in things like free agency where before you had both the owner and the coach working against you a bit because it was not super appealing destination wise unless you went to Temple or whatever. So you didn't
want to spend time in practice learning about the marketing strategies of Coke versus Pepsi, Lauren?
Oh, well, I mean, listen, there's plenty to learn there. I could just listen to Colin Cowherd for that, though. So it's fine. But no, I mean, like, I think that helps a lot for sure. But his perception wasn't going to change just because he decided to shut up for a year.
That's the thing. Like, that's what kind of dawned on me in reading this is I think he is much less of a hindrance to the team's success than he was before. And if you were on the team in 23 and 24, maybe you recognize that. Otherwise, do you realize how much work you have to do when you are labeled a bad owner to change that perception? And look, I'm not even saying that Dave deserved his perception to do a complete 180 or even a 90-degree turn. I think he is a little bit better than a D-, especially if last year the grade was also D-.
Well, I mean, I think like you said, like you mentioned facilities, like the Rock Hill thing, not a good look. Sorry, it's just not. Like if you're a player, you're like,
I believe the team's official position is what Rock Hill thing? What are you talking about?
Exactly. And so like that's a problem and that's going to be a bad look. And so if they're complaining about your facilities and they know that you were about to get one done and suddenly started acting a fool as he did about that whole thing, like that's not going to be a good look for you. Sorry. Especially when it's not like you're in an area where like everything is the most expensive either. Right. Like, it's not like you're in California or New York where it costs a lot more to like build shit. It doesn't, whatever, it's just being cheap. And like people don't like that. Players don't like that. If you're not going to pay to make their lives better, like in a meaningful way, they're not going to enjoy that very much. And then also he's embarrassed. He's been embarrassing in the past. Like I said, he shut up for a year, but that doesn't mean he won't be embarrassing again. And they know that.
I don't think this was taken into account with the surveys this year, but to your point about you knew what you were about to get and it got yanked away from you. Not getting the facility, 3 years ago that you thought you were getting or that you thought you were on the verge of getting. given what's about to happen to construction prices, do you know how long it's going to be before you get an upgraded facility now? Like, I don't know. Like, that just dawned on me as you and I are talking. So I'm not saying that every player has had deep conversations about this. I am just saying, like, it's going to get a lot. That particular aspect of the Panthers is going to get graded a lot more harshly if it was not already done.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, it's not like you said, there's no indication it will get better anytime soon either. So
yeah, I mean, look, and it's everything, right? Like,
yeah,
forget all the talk about renovating or building a new Dean Dump. That's not happening for a long time, right? Like, it's everything. It's just, it particularly affects the Panthers because they thought they were about to be out of this archaic practice facility, and now God only knows when they're getting out.
God only knows. Yeah, I wish he would tell me.
We'll see you next week, everybody.